Such a horrible thing to happen to any creature, and it was so awful in so many ways.
It is one of nature's simple creatures, but in Minnesota's famed waters, a mysterious disease is deforming and killing hundreds of thousands of frogs.
We certainly were concerned about human health issues also, so we really wanted to look at every aspect of the environment of the frog. It took over my life.
Judy Helgen of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is here to tell us more. Dr. Helgen, you've had 14 test sites in Minnesota, and you've discovered it's definitely in the water.
Well, I'm Judy Helgen. I'm a retired research scientist from Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I wrote a book called Peril in the Ponds, and that is telling this story. My colleague and I at Pollution Control were doing biological evaluations of wetlands. In 1995, Cindy Reinitz at the charter school brought kids out here in August to do a nature walk. And they started picking up these deformed frogs. And at first they just thought they were injuries, but they found so many. And she wanted to call somebody in the state to come and help, and so she called me.
Last September, we reported that deformed frogs were turning up in Sueur County.
Once it went into the news media here, I was getting calls from all over the state, and then it became national. I mean, there were 45 states.
Scientists are scratching their heads over something that's been found in the waters of Minnesota: frogs born with deformities.
Even by the late 90s, that had deformed frogs in them, and international. I mean, what was happening in the 1990s was new, and it wasn't just this pond. It was much broader in impact, so that's what made it even more and more serious.
Every day, little creatures suddenly start becoming freaks, and then the hero or the heroine has to find out what's happening before humans begin to suffer.
The most sensational frogs that went all over the world in the pictures are the ones with the extra legs. But it turns out that most of them had missing limbs, or part of a limb, part of a, the foot was gone, or the total limb was gone. And that was like 60% of the kind of deformities found here, but also nationally. It was on everybody's mind, and that's why we ended up partnering with Minnesota Health Department, and the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences was one of our big partners, because their concern really was, are things that are going wrong in the environment also a problem for humans potentially? And they were great partners for us. Well, we had a contract with a lab that did a test developed with very early stage tadpoles, and they were finding a lot of deformities from Minnesota sites that had deformed frogs in them. And they also discovered, thank goodness, because they discovered that if they passed the pond water through an activated charcoal filter, it removed the activity that would cause deformities in the lab embryos. They happened to sample people's wells, and the wells happened to cause deformities in the lab test. The guy from the national lab called me at night one time to say, the well water caused deformities, and we immediately got the people activated charcoal filters, because right at that time they also found out that the charcoal filtration would get rid of the cause, whatever it was. They concluded that something was in the water, and it wasn't, it was chemical.
It's a biological mystery that's been puzzling scientists here in Minnesota and around the country for years.
One of our managers came into a meeting and slammed his stuff down and said, how did we ever get involved with deformed frogs? Because we had so much media attention and we had controversy. And, we had to do press conferences, and, there were things that were happening where some people didn't want us looking at chemical pollution, for instance. And so there were a lot of cross currents. And besides, the whole biological monitoring idea was tenuous there in the mid-90s. I think now, as I said, it's a very well-established program at the Pollution Control Agency. But there was a feeling that DNR should be doing this, and we were feeling, no, this is potentially a pollution problem, we should be doing it. But there were times when we were almost lost our jobs, I'll say. You had to believe in what you were doing, no matter what. I finally had to say, we can't do interviews, because it was taking over the total job. I mean, you know, Nightline and CBS News and the Lair program. I mean, I was glad to do it, but at the same time, you know, all of a sudden a truck rolls up and someone says, well, CBS News is down in the parking lot and they want to talk, you know. And at that point I said, you know, we really have to draw the line and do our work. But it was good because it put the story out to everybody. I think everybody was kind of worn out trying to figure this out and without coming up with answers, and the Pollution Control Agency just shut it down, and I think it was 2002. The problem hasn't gone away, but nobody's looking. Well, you have to be passionate about what you do. You have to get out and look, because if we're not looking at the frogs, we don't know if they still have a problem. And that's sort of the bigger picture, is if we're not looking at the health of the environment, we don't know if it's healthy. And so I think that's the big story to me, that you have to go out and look.